Hey, John, you're all set.
Good. Thank you, Greg. Well, welcome everyone. And I think everyone confirmed earlier that they'd received this agenda I sent around for the meeting. So why don't we just start off with topic one, which I think just to make sure everybody's on the same page, everybody who has thoughts about these matters has a chance to being on the deliverables list, has a chance to express their view. These were taken from the letter that Rybrook sent to the various municipalities soliciting your participation. But I don't know if anybody ever got back and said, yeah, they're great, or we want to add something. So let's take this opportunity. Maybe we just go down them one by one. If people have any comments on them, if people, whatever their thoughts are. It's also permissible to say you're okay with it.
Okay.
Apologies, we're talking about the issues that were flagged in the last meeting.
Well, this is the deliverables. This is the
Oh, okay.
first section of the agenda. It's the deliverables.
Thank you.
Did you get my email, Rich? Do you have it? Yeah, okay.
I did. I'm pulling it up right now so I can
Great.
look at it. Thank you.
I mean, the first one seems kind of what we're here for. It's probably not very controversial at all. So shall we move on to the second one? The second one is prepare a master plan supplement position paper for each of the municipal elected boards to consider endorsing. That could be presented to the county as part of their public community engagement program. I mean, my first thought that comes to mind is we may be opining upon or coming to a view on a number of issues. And for whatever reason, every municipality might not feel they can sign off on every issue. And how do people, what do people react? People think that won't be a problem, or it could be a problem.
All about how general you make it.
Right.
You want it to be specific enough that it's useful. You know, I suppose a municipality could endorse our document with exceptions if they felt they needed to take exception to a particular view that we express. But maybe they accept other sections. They could, you know, so their endorsement doesn't need to be, I wouldn't think 100% in favor or against.
That's my thought as well. Although it could be kind of like a mutual support organization, in that there's some issue that's particularly important to one municipality. The other one says, I don't really care about that, but they support anyway, so that people will support the issue they care about. So I think we're going to have to, I mean, the people on this call are the ones who are going to have to do that. Talking to their municipalities in case there is that type of an issue that arises. I'm hoping, though, that we're pretty, I think the issues we've identified so far, we may identify more, but the ones we've identified so far are pretty straightforward, I think. I don't think they'll be particularly controversial.
No, but you're going to have a situation, for instance, Rye really doesn't care about noise, whereas Greenwich does. And Greenwich doesn't contributes to the flooding that occurs in Rye, and probably doesn't really care about the flooding in Rye, where Rye does considerably, and Greenwich should be taking more action in that regard. So there's a little bit of tension in some of these issues.
But, you know, we're not really, let's talk about this. My impression is we're not really asking any municipality to do much more than endorse the issues that get identified as valid, and that the solutions being proposed are reasonable. That's kind of what we're asking for, I think.
Agreed.
That's fair.
Okay. Moving right along. So the third deliverable was advise the elected boards on any issues or concerns regarding the expiration of the terminal use agreement. Anyone have a thought? Does anyone think that'll be controversial?
No, it's free advice.
When is actually the day?
Sorry, what is the
What is the day? What is the day that the agreement expires
Oh, December 31st.
this year?
Yeah. So
Okay.
that is something of a priority issue if we want to make a statement.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that was a 30-year agreement that was first created in 1994.
Time flies.
Yeah, and Westchester County is the only actually airport in the whole country that has that.
So my question, since we're talking about this particular issue, can the federal government just not pay attention to the county and it's really in charge of this airport? Can they just not have an agreement?
I don't, maybe some people on the county airport advisory committee would have a view on that. I believe it is an agreement that has been sanctioned by the FAA 30 years ago. So whether
Right,
they
so,
change
but,
their
no,
mind-
so my question is, but once it expires, let's say this is January 1st, since no new agreement has been reached, can the federal government decide it doesn't want any agreement from that point? I mean, I know they can always sign up for it, but I'm just saying that is an option for them, for the government, for the federal government.
John, can I chime in?
Oh, sure, Peter.
So as the county will point out to you, the good news here is that,
know.
can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. The good news is that while the terminal use agreements are expiring, the agreements are simply a requirement of the terminal use procedures law, which is a county law. And it's that law, which is ongoing, it doesn't expire, and the FAA signed off on the law. So it's not that, so the county will say, hey, don't worry about January 1st, the day after these agreements expire. The law is still in effect, and the airlines have to sign a new agreement in order to stay in compliance with the law and keep being able to use the airport. Okay. And that's, I don't have any argument with that. Here's the concern. The concern is that number one, for some reason, all the agreements were set to expire on the same day, meaning that if the airlines want to be difficult, even though all of them want to continue using Westchester Airport, they also know that Westchester wants the airport to continue getting used. So having all these agreements expire on the same day creates a potential game of legal chicken between the airlines on the one hand and the county on the other, that, doesn't bode well for the interests of the communities around the airport. And the second issue is that the current agreements prohibit, by signing the current agreements, the airlines have agreed, among other things, not to challenge the legality of the law, of the terminal use procedures law. So theoretically, on January 1st, they're free to initiate a lawsuit and seek an injunction. And so if there's no agreement, you could have a situation where, there's an injunction that stops the county from booting out all the airlines pending the lawsuit. And now you have a lawsuit that could undo the only legal framework that keeps that arguably keeps Westchester County Airport from mushrooming in size because of the ultimate capacity it could have to grow. So that's the situation, and that's why I think our communities should be urging the county to wrap this up with new long-term agreements well in advance of the deadline.
Well,
And
since you're
then
at
that-
you're at the 6 month part, nothing is well in advance anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with you, Nick.
So it's a crisis situation. That
Yeah, as soon as possible.
No, that's what I was wondering. What effect does the county executive election has to, because without his leadership, that too is, he's gone. How this is going to go on? That's what I was wondering.
Well, we don't know
That's
that till June.
That's a concern, and I think it behooves. It's
Has to
another
hurry
reason
up.
for us to voice, for our communities, our group and our communities to voice our concern about this, to make sure it's not falling through the cracks given everything else on his plate.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for your explanation.
You're welcome.
This is an example because its timing is a bit faster than any timing on the master plan, where we may have to separate this issue out from the other master plan issues and come to a view on what we want to say as a committee, and then go back to the municipalities and just treat this separately, because it's, as Peter said, there's a hard deadline that's 7 months away or something. I think that's in fact the only thing we can do, and we should probably aim to have some type of document we can put before the various municipalities in September, so that they can either approve or not, and we can get it to the county hopefully by the end of September. I don't know. I don't know that I'm not that familiar with how the processes work, so I don't know if that's outrageously optimistic or just reasonably optimistic.
And so let's move on to number 4, I think, right? Well, there's nothing really there, right? That's just a statement, really.
Yeah, right. That's number 4.
It's really a statement.
But what do people think about the idea that we might have to carve out the terminal use agreement issue in order to meet a more appropriate deadline than full comments on the master plan? To me, it seems unavoidable, but that would be my view.
I think that makes
I
sense
agree.
because it's the most time-sensitive issue at hand.
Right.
Yep.
It's also complicated by the politics going on here with George Latimer trying to run for Congress. So if he's nominated in June, his focus is going to be elsewhere.
Agreed.
I have faith in him that he
Somebody-
will do the right thing. I think he's a pretty good guy, I think.
No, it's not about doing the right thing. It's about having time to do the right thing.
Well, he has, I assume, some staff who we can delegate this to if he's not going to be able to focus on it. Someone else will pick up the baton, hopefully.
Yeah, but also the election will be till just November 5th, right?
Right, but the critical time is obviously between now and November 5th to get this, any comments we have on the terminal use agreements to the legislature, and so that they can determine if we have any substantive changes that we think are necessary, or if the communities think changes are necessary. I'm curious if the airlines, Peter mentioned that they could sue or challenge the terminal use procedures law. Have the airlines been making any noise about their dissatisfaction with the current terminal use agreements? Do we expect a lot of pushback from new agreements, you know, or is everyone thinking generally that the existing agreements should just be extended in their current form? I'm just curious what the temperature is out there on this issue with the county, with the airlines. Does anyone know?
Just from being at county airport advisory board meetings where this has come up a couple of times, I can tell you that the county is not sharing any specifics about dialogue with the airlines. They're kind of implying that there doesn't seem to be a problem. Oh,
Okay.
but you know, and I hope that's true. As for, but you know, it's there's a lot riding on this. You know, too much, I think, for us to just take it for granted that this is going to be a slam dunk. You know, for sure. I mean, the airlines may themselves be strategically, you know, waiting because they're, you know, again, the leverage increases as you get closer to, you know, to the impact, if you consider this a game of chicken.
Right.
As for the content, the FAA, the FAA approval letter, which is viewable by everybody on the resources page of the committee website that you know that everybody got information on. A key requirement of the FAA's endorsement of this was that the rules for airlines will not get more restrictive. So, you know, if we wanted to go in that direction, we probably can't. But I will just flag that from a few years ago, myself and some others were kind of a bit in the weeds on this, and you know the letter of the law of these agreements is not being followed in the sense that, and that is arguably leading to some of the overcrowding that people have had at the airport. The letter of the law of the agreements and the law basically says that it's 240 passengers per half hour in planing and deplaning, so coming and going combined. But it also says that activity has to all take place from beginning to end in each half hour period. But in practice, what happens is at certain key times, you get some planes leaving, you know, say at 6:25, and then other planes leaving at 6:35. Each one of those is a different half hour period, and together they don't go over the 240 passenger threshold. But clearly, you know, the 6:25 or the 6, you know, clearly the 6:35 is the planing process is starting before 6:30. So what you really have at some points is, you know, up to twice the number of passengers all having to be in the airport getting ready to board, you know, at the same time, and you're well above capacity, and that leads to overcrowding in a sense that there's something wrong. But what's arguably what's wrong is how the agreement is being administered by the county. And the airport advisory board asked for an explanation of how that's audited. And frankly, we've been put off for well over a year now, with the county kind of using some of the litigations, airport related litigations, as an excuse to say they don't want to go into it. So I'll leave it at that.
But Peter, maybe the current terminal use agreement has some weaknesses that could get shored up. But is it by and large an acceptable agreement, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sorry. If it wasn't clear, I think by and large it is an acceptable agreement. It's a wonderful resource that we have that virtually nobody else in the country does in terms of being able to control the volume and frequency of large planes coming in and out. I mean, indirectly, of course, because the number of planes is not technically controlled by the agreement, but by virtue of the number of passengers and gates, it accomplishes the same thing. So, yeah, this is arguably a nitpick, which we can decide as a group if we want to reference. But by and large, I think the agreement as it stands has served our communities very well over the years.
Yeah, to me,
That's a powerful statement that, would be worth possibly making from this group and having endorsed by the communities, right? Because, and obviously that's the easier path forward, I would think, if the airlines are generally in agreement and the county's in agreement, then, we look at an extension. Also make it easier from acceptance of the FAA, right? If the current agreements are just extended into the future.
Agreed.
yeah, I agree too.
So, I mean, if that's something we can, get some consensus around, that would be great. And one thought on the monitoring data, looking at our other mission in terms of expansion, say that we feel it's important to have better data on total passenger counts by the hour, so that we can better understand expansion needs. It just may be the case. I think that the way I read the terminal use agreement, those are, good parameters to use as goals, but invariably flights get delayed. Flight is late coming in, going out. So things are going to overlap. You're going to end up with, instead of 240, you're going to end up with, as you said, 480, right? You get double the passengers, and that terminal just can't handle 480 people. So it's really, I think, not designed to handle reality, which is that these planes are going to be, more staggered than the use agreement leads you to believe.
Yeah, although again, I'll point out that as of February, there are now double the amount of seats that there used to be in the expanded waiting area.
Yeah, it's still
So-
not enough though. I mean, I've been in there sitting on the floor, it's cheek by jowl. The food service area there is totally inadequate for the number of people there. The lines are extremely long. You're waiting just to get a bottle of water. It really is a crammed situation. So there's space in that building that I think could be better utilized, and that should be obviously the first thing we suggest they look at. But I think to have some good passenger counts, so they may not want to give us the data if they have it because of losses, but we could say, in terms of understanding expansion needs, we really need to have this data to review and see if that,
Hey,
that focus gets us what we want.
Yeah, but
Martha, John, I'm just wondering, given everything that's been discussed up until now, maybe we can form a little working group, which I would volunteer to be part of, maybe with Martha, one or two other people, and with the intent to come up with a draft, a draft statement or resolution or something that we could, as a group, circulate as soon as possibly before our next meeting, and use this as a sort of a first go round on coming to consensus on something and sharing it with our municipalities.
yeah, well, given that the timing issue, I think that would be a very important step.
Sure.
Could I get some clarity on sharing with our municipalities? Would that mean one of the committee members going out, appearing at a public hearing, reading a statement on behalf of this committee? to raise awareness and ask for action? Was that the end game?
Not a,
Could-
not a
it could
public
be.
hearing, but a public meeting.
Public meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would involve us at the very least reaching back to our whoever whatever body appointed us, indicating that there is some work product that the committee that the task force has endorsed, and would like the municipal governments to come together on, and then seeing how we're told to proceed.
Yeah, Peter, you stole the words out of my mouth, about to say that before. Yeah, you guys do any of that, definitely make sure that whatever you have, you run it by your elected bodies and your village or city managers too.
Yeah.
Good suggestion.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
You're gonna have some quite unhappy people if on that side if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and again, just because time moves quickly and the summer is the summer, and we're up against it a bit with the terminal use, might be a good idea for all of us proactively to indicate that there's at least one topic that the task force is hoping to come up with with recommendations on. And so if we know in advance what kind of process our respective municipal representatives want us to follow, the sooner we kind of know that, the better.
Yeah. Well, does anyone think any of their municipalities are in favor of relaxing the 240 limit, or are all the municipalities pretty much on the same page about that?
I think with the village of Portchester, I think they have to get a little more educated on what the numbers are. So it'd be my task to let them know what's going on.
Okay.
Right, and how that translates into number of planes, because number of passengers isn't really a criterion or a number that people can get their heads around, but certainly number of planes coming and going is, right? So we just have to equate that to the planes coming and going and the size limitations for those planes that implies, right?
Right.
Yeah, and technically there's one of the other part of the rule, everybody focuses on the passenger side, but the other part of the rule is 2 gates per half hour. So effectively that means 2 flights per half hour. And it's not like we can adjust it. We can't have 2.5 or 3 or 1. We either need to follow the rule that was in place prior to 1980, because that gives us like grandfathering rights before the law changed. Otherwise, we would, again, I'm not a lawyer, so we certainly could, it's possible that aviation legal experts could come up with a third option. But as I've been led to understand it, we either maintain the grandfathered rules that we had, which allow us to, to essentially limit things to these 2 flights per half hour, or we lose all limitation other than the maximum the airport can safely handle. And technically, there are at least I think 6 jet bridges at the terminal, not to mention the potential for expansion of the terminal. So, we either keep it the way it is, or we kind of open the floodgates.
Yeah.
So my only question about, how has aviation changed in the last 30 years? What size planes can we expect from the airline that the airlines will be operating going forward? Is the 240 limit still realistic and consistent with the type of planes that these airlines are going to be bringing into Westchester. I don't know enough about, new airplane designs and what's coming, right? So
The
we want to make
airport,
sure that our rules are consistent with what aviation has available.
yeah, I mean, in all the time we've spent at the Airport Advisory Board and other advocacy meetings, I've never heard an airport official claim that the current rules make it impossible for airlines to operate modern equipment. And while we have seen certain airlines diminish or leave Westchester, we've seen other airlines jump in to expand or start operations here. There are limits on the weight of planes anyway, and where they can, you can't. I mean, there was a brief attempt to do some transcontinental flights here, but there are real limitations based on runway length and weight limits and such. But there is so the answer seems to be that no one's claiming that these rules are suffocating or choking off commercial aviation here. But there has definitely been it used to be that there were more smaller aircraft flights. Sorry. There are definitely fewer larger planes now. And the planes are fuller. So according to the airport, we're at like 95, 98% capacity in terms of what the terminal use agreements allow because of the extra the larger flights and the fact that they're maxing out. I mean, there may be planes where they can't fill the entire plane. I think that does happen. They have to leave some seats empty. I'm sure, the passengers don't mind having a little elbow room. But basically that's the sense I've gotten from the airport over time. I don't know if Mike wants to share additional perspective on that.
Mike has gone blank for the moment. I guess my question would be, trying to keep this simple enough that we can actually bring it to the various municipalities and get them to kind of understand by keeping the principle simple. I mean, we're not looking to change any aspects of the terminal use agreement. So we really want to them to reaffirm their support for the existing terminal use agreements. And I think, as Juliana pointed out, we probably then want to have 2 or 3 paragraphs describing what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too simple.
But you'd also have to very clearly separate the endorsement of the terminal use agreement from comments relative to the master plan.
Correct.
I can see municipalities saying, okay, but what about the noise issue or the flooding issue or the other issue that they're more concerned about. So we have to make sure that they're separated.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's why, because of the timing issue, I think that we must separate them. And I think when we separate them, I think we can avoid that problem.
But in any sort of statement, we have to say there is an ongoing review of the master plan and there'll be further discussion coming forward at a later date or something to that effect.
And also, perhaps if we can say that, our group's discussion of the current TUA, that we don't see anything in the current TUA that dramatically, creates a problem in terms of noise, et cetera, that those are separate issues we have to deal with, but we by endorsing this TUA, we're, in general agreement that this is not making a situation worse. In other words, there's nothing baked into those TUAs that's causing overstressing the environment or, the noise situation. Those tend to be more FAA issues than they are actual operation of the airport issues and related to the FBOs and so forth as well. Different issues.
Yeah,
I
keep
think
in
that'll be a
mind,
question. They'll be saying, well, by signing off on this, are we, going to get worse flooding? Are we going to get worse noise? And I think we have to agree and say, no, it's going to be what it has been, and we're going to continue to work on those other issues. But they are unrelated to, this particular operating aspect of the airport.
yeah, and keep in mind that because of the terminal use regulations, the law, and the agreements, only 15% of airport traffic involves commercial airlines.
Right,
So to
and that
the-
would be in one of our 2 to 3 paragraphs, I think.
Right. To the extent that there are, concerns about airport impacts, the concerns are presumably brought about in great part by the 85% of operations that are not limited in any way by the terminal use regulations.
Right. So those will be important points to make. It's sort of our preamble to this request to approve or continue the existing agreements.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just a simple bullet point list stating what they are, and then a summary of why, what our reasons are.
Yeah. I think that can be done.
Juliana, you want to join our working group? Keep us honest?
Sure.
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
Well, except of course that I don't have the authority to form the working groups. So I defer to John
Peter,
and
I
Mike.
think it's clear you have a lot of knowledge about this, so you have to be on the group. So you might as well take a role in forming it. So you have Juliana, I think Martha was on board.
Sure.
Do you want a fourth person? We have a fourth person who wants to be on board. There'll be other opportunities to get on, other ships.
Yeah, I'd like everyone else who's, not, I think having a smaller group to craft it is good, and then have everybody else be, sounding board for what we write, so that, look at it with fresh eyes and make sure we're not missing something important.
Good. So we have Peter, Juliana, and Martha on the terminal use agreement issue. Okay, thank you all for volunteering. So shall we then move on to point number 2, which is the update on the EMS cost issue, which I think Nick, you and Martha, you represent Rice City?
And Nick, yes.
Yeah, so the two of you raised this issue. I talked about it with our village administrator, Chris Bradbury. The 3 directly affected municipalities have already started a process on this, and they've put together a fair amount of information, quantitative information, and justifications for why the county should put in the airport's budget something to help defer the costs of the EMS service to the airport. And they had what struck me, you were there too, Greg, so you can comment. What struck me as a favorable reception by the county, but no decisions were made. So I think, having talked with Chris, this is a type of issue. It's almost like the TUA, but it isn't on such a tight time or frame. We basically are we'll state the facts. Chris Bradbury has given me a bunch of information. We'll state the facts, and we'll say we support the efforts of the municipalities to receive some compensation for this service.
I agree. That's excellent.
So just to summarize, it's It's Rybrook, Rye, and Portchester.
Those are the three that have approached the county. to
So the
get-
other communities would be supporting those three.
Right. That's
Yeah,
all.
I'll comment a little bit on this too, John. That's because again, the main EMS service is the Portchester Rybrook EMS because that's where pretty much all the airport jurisdiction falls under. So that's they're really the only responding EMS service. I mean, fire again, we still a little bit different. There's 7 responding departments, as well as the airport does have a couple of apparatuses of their own. So as it stands now, just to comment a little bit on legally, it can't be forced because of their government status. But as John mentioned, Chris in particular has been, as well as the city of Rye and Portchester, have had numerous conversations with the county executive's office, as well as Joan McDonald, who is the director of operations, to come up with an agreeable solution to compensate again the EMS service, particularly that Rybrook EMS, in order to give us that money back. But again, some of those calls, especially if the EMTs have to wait there for a long time, sometimes I'm playing it's a long time that they're sitting there, particularly if it's an RMA, which is a reviews medical attention. You often don't get reimbursed for those. So it's a huge expense incurred by the EMS agency. And it would be, again, whatever money they would pay, it would still be a lot cheaper if they had a contract out their own EMS.
Well, and I think this is the type of issue where the various other municipalities might be in support
Correct,
of the
yes.
three that are most directly affected. And having the committee, the task force, take a stand on the issue could give it more political impetus and attract more attention at the county level.
Yeah, and just to clarify too, the county executive office has been supportive again of these proposals too. And then Chris is going to be in short time meeting with Susan Spear, who is the deputy commissioner of countywide emergency services, to help further this along.
When do they put the airport budget together? Is a fiscal year like January 1st?
So yeah, so the county, to my understanding, operates like on a calendar budget year from January 1st to December 31st. And any airport expenses, to my understanding, would just be part of their like regular budget regular budget cycle.
Okay, so this service to the airport was mentioned in the prior master plan. So I don't know, this may need to be a little accelerated as well, but maybe not. And but I think I'll write up for our next meeting kind of the information Chris has given me, so everyone can take a look at it and comment on it. But I think honestly, it's a pretty straightforward story. I didn't know the whole story, but he gave me a bunch
It
of
does need to be
documents.
accelerated. It's on the same schedule.
Yeah.
By the way, do we know, obviously, the same principle would apply and impact, I guess, Harrison to some extent, but they've declined to date to nominate people to serve on this task force. So, but North Castle does have a small slice of the airport. So, do we know if services based in or related to their town are at least have the potential to get drawn in and involved in this?
Yeah, I looked into that, Peter, and I wasn't able to identify any services that North Castle would be providing. The one that occurred to me was fire, but the airport has its own fire.
Only a couple rigs, but then there's 7 EMS. It's pretty much again the Portchester Rybrook EMS, which covers all 3 units. That's the EMS, or really only EMS service in the area. Fire, it's 7 different departments, and the airport does have a couple of apparatuses too. But the 7 different departments, so with fire, so it's not as much of an unequitable burden as opposed to EMS. It's only one responding agency, and then police, it's the Westchester County Police.
So even if something happens in, say, the former Air National Guard site, which might be, I'm not 100% sure, but that seems to me like it would be in North Castle. But even so, the closest EMS response, and therefore the one the airport would rely on, would be the Rybrook Portchester, huh?
Correct. And unless, obviously, if you have a major incident at the airport, like if a plane like did like a hard crash landing, then of course, if it's a huge incident, then you'll have multiple responding agencies. But for pretty much, again, more than 90% of calls, it's pretty much going to be that one responding agency. Because that's pretty much what you get. Like if someone is having a medical, like let's say there's a plane incoming in the NIT, but our EMTs have to wait there for them to arrive and then have to evaluate the patient. And they could be there sometimes for hours. So those calls can take up a lot of time.
All right, well, I'll put together a short discussion of this issue and have it ready by the next meeting so people can take a look at it.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, I think you and Nick brought it to my attention. I just became interested.
An extra thank you then. Thank you for doing that.
Okay, so let's move on to the other 6 issues that Michael had enumerated in his first summation of our original meeting of this group. And we have to figure out what type of statements we want to make and who's going to work on them. Now, some of this, like the reimbursement issue, obviously I just covered off. So that leaves us basically with 5 issues: noise, air pollution, water, passenger experience, which could be the terminal use agreement, and FBOs operating as if they were commercial carriers. So do we go, you want to go down them one by one and we'll see who's interested in the issue? Let's start with
Sure.
noise.
I just had a quick comment regarding noise. We've noticed a significant increase in low-flying helicopters, not simply just larger planes, but low-flying helicopters. I don't know what's changed or why, but I wonder if that's worth specifying.
Yeah, we
Definitely
would
is, and
actually,
that's a concern in Rye as well. Yeah.
because they come from Greenwich, then they come right down along the shoreline.
Right. The house shakes. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe helicopters can fly lower than the planes. I don't know, but it's
Yeah, I think that could definitely be included in the noise commentary.
And the increase is due to the operator, I believe, called Blade, which is a private service. But I don't know who, I assume it's an FAA, a controlled route that they take wherever they're coming and going, but it's definitely something that we and Rye would like to have looked at.
Well, it's both route and I don't know, what's the right term? Elevation?
Elevation,
How
right?
high are they flying?
Altitude.
Altitude, thank you.
You and I are both engineers and architects. We think in elevation. Yeah.
I guess they really have similar status to the FBO operators,
I believe they do.
which wouldn't.
Well, just to be clear, the helicopter companies like Blade, the operators are similar to any other private operator. And I'm not an expert on the helicopter routes and guidelines for the helicopter routes. But I do 100% think that number one, the master plan could address efforts to better communicate and enforce the kind of restrictions that there or guidelines that there are. FBOs, let's be clear, those are those are like those are like the gas stations at the airport. So they're not the vehicles, in this case aircraft, using those gas stations. Some of them are are very bare bones, but they'll provide parking and gas to planes, and some minimal services. Others are very fancy, but they're two different types of entities at the airport. FBOs lease space, lease buildings from the county, and then make those facilities available to operators of different types, whether they're planes or helicopter operators.
So who would the helicopters buy fuel from? Wouldn't that be the fixed base operator? Is another?
Yeah. So they would, right. Unlike other airports, Westchester does not have any, self-fueling or, airport-owned fueling options. If you're a private operator, unless you lease your own hangar and have your own equipment, and then you can buy directly from the county. Otherwise, the FBOs have the equipment to transport fuel from the airport fuel farm to their facilities and pump it into the different aircraft. And I think even some of the corporate, lessees who lease hangar space contract with one or the other of the FBOs to take care of their fueling.
Okay, so noise then, who would like to work on putting together a noise statement?
Well, before we do that, can I
Okay.
just then ask, I mean, are FBOs really a separate category, or are they actually something contributing to noise, to air pollution, to water? I mean, contributing to all these different other issues.
I took the FBO issue out to be a volume issue, number of flights. And it does affect all those things, but I think it's probably a separate issue, no?
So I think we should be clear in our terminology. There are actually the operators, and then the FBOs are the terminals, so to speak, or the gas stations, if you want to call them that have the hangar space, and perform maintenance services on the aircraft. So the operators would be like Blade, NetJet, et cetera, right?
Right.
NetJet does also have an FBO, but there are multiple operators flying out of, say, Signature Flight Support. That's not just one, operator there. It's one FBO, but it's multiple operators. So you have to think about the FBOs in terms of terminals, like they're terminals for multiple just like our terminals for multiple airlines. It's the same idea.
Can I interrupt for one moment? Janusz here.
Yeah.
So there are some, like you're saying FBOs. What does FBO stand for actually? Does you guys might know, but I have never heard, first time ever. So what do they stand for?
Flight-based operations.
Okay. And the one above that says VRFF.
It's the
where is it?
Voluntary restraint from flying.
Okay.
Which is the official name for the voluntary curfew. Period.
That helps. Okay, so operation, right? What does I'm sorry. What does the letter F stands for? Base operation, you said, right? But F stands for flight. Thank you. And one more. What is? I'm sure F stands for flight again. PFAS. What do they stand for?
Oh, PFAS.
Those are contaminants.
Okay, it's nothing to do with flight.
Thank you.
Yep,
that's just contaminant. Okay.
That's I think specific type of contaminant.
It's
fluoro.
Polyfluoride.
Okay, like fluoro.
Polyfluoro something.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. Now I
Base substances. Okay. Yeah. Often used in firefighting.
Yeah.
And I think previously in de-icing, no longer, but it's everywhere.
Yeah. No, but somebody, like we mentioned earlier, there's two fire trucks at the airport But I think they're mostly loaded with foam probably, and not necessarily putting out fire for buildings, I would think, but maybe I'm thinking wrong.
According to the county, they're not using foam anymore.
No?
They're using water.
Oh,
Because the PFAS, contamination has been acknowledged to be such an issue.
There are new foams, though, without PFAS that are also being used elsewhere. I don't know if the county has moved on to those options,
Yeah,
but
the last I heard from them, it was water.
okay.
We were hoping that the FAA would officially approve a non-PFAS foam.
Right, foam is
such
better
as
than water, as you know, right? For putting out, I mean, you don't want to put a grease fire out in your kitchen with water. There's a lot of reasons you want to use foam.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not going to claim to be the expert on acronyms here, but I've also heard FBO translated as fixed base operator.
Yeah, either flight, you see it both ways, flight base or fixed base operator. I've seen both.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one is.
oh, thank you. And I got the EMS one.
May I ask a quick question regarding the TUA? Is the VRFF connected to the TUA in any way, shape, or form? And is that something we want to consider when we're recommending an extension of the existing?
Sadly, no.
Okay.
And because we did not have a overnight curfew in effect prior to 1990, the county at one point tried and lost in court to have a curfew with teeth.
Right.
And there's I believe what's known as a permanent injunction in place to prevent the county from having sort of an enforceable overnight curfew, like, for example, Teterboro, has the luck of having had the curfew in place, but they're not able to impose any limitations on flights and passengers in and out. So we have one. Yeah, we have one exception. They have a different exception. That doesn't mean, by the way, that the county has no tools and no options to discourage overnight, flights. But we don't have to dive into that right now.
So, where I live, I see small planes that are louder than the large ones. The other ones, they're very like whispering when the plane flies by, JetBlue or some of the big ones. I've seen some little ones that are jets that are noisy as heck, worse than anything I've heard on a big plane. So does this volunteer restraining, regulation, do they have anything to do with those smaller planes? Or because it says large planes, so are they controlled in any way also?
No.
So they're 85% do whatever they want, actually, right?
Yeah, I mean the history is, I've mentioned 1990. What's magical about 1990 and what existed before versus after? There was a piece of legislation passed that's referred to as ANCA, and I'm not even going to attempt that acronym. But the bottom line is, the legislation was basically a trade-off. The aviation industry agreed to a set of timetables for improving engine efficiency and therefore reducing noise over the coming years. And in exchange for that, the federal government prohibited local airports from restricting flights in and out. Of course, the main reason for doing so would be noise. So it was like, okay, we'll accelerate or agree and commit to quieter engines over time. And in return, we won't have to continue to face restrictions on using airports from local NIMBY folks. And the only restrictions that in some cases were allowed to persist were the ones that were pre-existing as of 1990, such as our terminal use regulations. And there's a lot of debate about, what what kinds of planes are noisier. I think there's little doubt that older planes are noisier. There's also little doubt that bigger planes are noisier, but that doesn't mean a newer, bigger plane might be quieter than an older, smaller plane.
That's my experience here living on King Street. I'm telling you, I
I
see
agree
them
with you.
fly by my window over here, and I'm up front, and I can see them. They fly physically over my garage, and I can. There's some big plane that I swear to God, the only way I would express how they sound is like a whispering, like a going by, with the engines. And I know they're planes, of course. And then I see a little, jet, whatever, the net jets, whatever. But maybe it's an older one, like you're saying. They're noisy as heck. I mean, I want to ask one more question. This maybe we did, maybe we didn't skip the pollution thing. Does anyone know, like, if a
We're not
plane
there
on
yet.
an annual basis, do they
Janners,
like?
Janners,
I'm sorry.
we haven't moved. That's the
Oh,
next
okay, that's
one.
right. I missed something. Okay, I'm good.
No,
I'll wait.
I wanted just to also add one thing because I was at the airport recently regarding the voluntary curfew. So they, as Peter said, they did try, but it went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court ruled that FAA had exclusive supremacy in that regard. So because again, the county does own the airport because they contract out, have a management company that runs it, but it's the FAA that regulates all air traffic, and the FAA has the final say. So they cannot. That's why they have a voluntary curfew. What they did tell us that they try to incentivize the airlines as much as possible to comply with it, but unfortunately they cannot mandate it because the FAA said that it doesn't want it, and the United States Supreme Court told them that they can't do it.
So we have very few levers to push when it comes to affecting noise. We can only maybe make suggestions to the FAA on flight paths for things like the private air, the helicopters like Blade, that the routes that are chosen for them be more considerate of the residential populations they're flying over, both in terms of time of day and altitude, right? Would that be, is that correct? Does everyone think that's about right?
Yeah, so the airport can have guidelines that are essentially voluntary. Those guidelines can, and there can also be mandatory stuff from the FAA. But if those don't exist today, it's not that you can never get something. In fact, there's a change in the works now that would affect Greenwich in particular along the coast for at least certain kinds of flights. That's, we've been told very excitedly, is only another couple of years away from going into effect. But that gives you a sense of the fact that yes, change is possible, but it takes a long time to wind through the FAA process.
Well, we should maybe start queuing that one up then,
Yeah.
especially related to the helicopters flying at
Yeah,
low
and-
altitude.
Yes, and another positive is that more recently, based on community and county requests, the FAA did a very preliminary analysis of all possible alternatives for that would help Harrison with noise. That didn't go anywhere for reasons that other parts of Greenwich would probably be happy about. I won't get into all the gory details, but and parts of Rybrook, I should add. But the other, what we have to understand is there are potential longer term ways to make things better that should certainly be explored. There are there are things that don't become rules necessarily, but can still be helpful in terms of norms and guidelines that pilots will can be made aware of, and many of whom will be good neighbors. Historically, for example, the corporations that have hangars and are based at Westchester have been very considerate in not violating the VRFF. That happens extremely rarely. So, with the right attitudes and the right guidelines in place, it can have a positive impact. But the other and the primary thing that the airport and the county has control over are the facilities. Okay, and this goes back to the question about FBOs versus noise. If you think about FBOs and other, hangar leases together, those facilities and the limitations that those facilities have just from a practical logistical point of view, that's the main leverage and the main way that the county, who owns those facilities, the FAA can't force the county to build more bigger hangars. They can't withhold funding if the county doesn't build more bigger hangars. So as long as basic
One of our recommendations should be no new FBOs.
Yeah, well, that is another, and that's something that should be, and I think is, a subject, relating to the master plan. In fact, that's probably, the biggest part of the master plan is how is the county going to possibly build out and or update and upgrade airport facilities. And, the main message, it would seem, should be, by all means, update and upgrade, but don't enlarge in ways that enable a greater volume of flights, with all the impacts, noise, air, and every traffic and everything else that would bring. And it's not, it's simple at one level, but then there will be the people who say, but, hey, planes are bigger than they used to be. So we need a bigger facility even for the same number of planes. And we don't have to get into the weeds, but that's really where the master plan can have the biggest impact, is in regulating and, putting some guardrails on facility development and upgrading over the next couple of decades.
I think these are all good issues, Peter, and they're ones, though, that should be probably hashed out in the small group who's going to work on the noise issue. Now, who wants to do that?
I would be happy to help with the noise issue. Admittedly, I am not as well versed as some of you in some of the policies and regulations, so I could only take it so far.
Okay, thank you, Rich.
John, considering that there's only a few people, or there are several people not here, why don't we do this by email rather than trying to go around now?
Okay.
I'll say I'll only work on water, but I'm happy to do that. But I think it'd be, if you did by email, it might be more efficient.
Yeah, and let me just say that, I can only really commit time-wise to one working group, but I'm more than happy if any other group, feels like it could be helpful for me or others, obviously, to take a look at, or address any questions. I'm happy to be helpful as much as I can.
Well, Peter, do you happen to know anyone who, for example, has a similar level of knowledge about the various noise issues you mentioned that we should try to recruit to the group?
The folks from Newcastle may be familiar with Rob Fleischer, who is the town's representative on the the town's representative on the airport advisory board. So, informally, if not as a member of the group, he could certainly be of great assistance. I don't know if any of the Greenwich people are familiar with a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Wong. He is incredibly knowledgeable. He moved from Harrison to Greenwich. And again, I don't, I wouldn't, he wouldn't be a formal member, but he could be an informal, advisor.
Peter, if you had the contact information, I'd be grateful if you'd make any intro, and I'd reach out.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that through John. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm trying to think in Rye. Well, you guys in Rye are pretty knowledgeable yourselves, but certainly those two leap to mind.
Okay, because I think it's obvious that even if we're going to try to be condensed and brief, there's a certain level of knowledge that needs to be brought to bear, and it isn't widespread. So we have to kind of figure this out. Okay, so
In Portchester, by the way, there's a gentleman, I think he's still living there, who used to chair the Rybrook Airport Advisory Council, and is certainly knowledgeable as well. His name's just escaping me at the moment, but I can get it if there's. What's that?
Is his last name Klein?
No, George Klein is another knowledgeable person. He happens to live in Ossining. He's an environmental advocate. I think he chairs the Hudson Valley Sierra Club chapter, but he's certainly a go-to person as well. He just doesn't happen to live in our communities, but he's very generous with his time.
well,
And as I say, there's that gentleman in Portchester whose name I can look up if there's an interest.
okay, I mean, I think Nick's suggestion is a good one. We could do this by some type of email chain, but I'm wondering if we ought not to at least kind of have some idea about who would be interested in what topics, working on what particular topics. Now, I take it, Nick, you're interested in water, but you're looking for other people to work on it as well.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. That's very fair. So, because, they're on a less rapid schedule than the TUA issue is. So maybe we just take a step back. I'll get out an email, ask for volunteers on the various issues, and find out who's got some interest, who's got some knowledge. Is that fair as an approach? Otherwise, it's 8:20 right now. I don't know how long people want to stay on the call. I know it's fascinating, but you probably have other things to do.
I think that makes sense. I just had a recommendation and wanted to add something to this list, which was, I mentioned in the first meeting, traffic. I'm wondering if we could combine noise with traffic.
Okay.
I'd be curious if any other communities are dealing with traffic issues, representing Greenwich in the Northwest because of Waze and Google Maps. They've created these small winding pitch black roads in the northwest section of Greenwich is the primary access path for Westchester County Airport. So these roads are now seeing hotel shuttles, a pre-dawn rush hour with passengers. And there was a traffic and safety hearing at Town Hall last week, and it came up again and again and again. So I don't know if any other communities are dealing with traffic as a real quality of life and safety issue.
Well, I think the Westchester ones are lucky in that we have the interstate right there, so.
But I
Wasn't
think,
sure King Street, maybe.
I think King Street is dangerous altogether.
Yeah.
the streets that come off of it. It's the cars speed by, especially in the school area. I think it's a dangerous road.
But what are thoughts about combining noise with traffic to try to see if we can get any movement on that issue?
I think it's
Great.
a separate issue.
Yeah,
Separate?
Yeah, but they're related. They should, I agree, traffic should be on the list.
yeah, I agree with that too, Rich. And I think though we might want to address them separately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I agree completely as well. And I think, I almost think that, you can do better. I mean, traffic can, the salience of the traffic issue, can come from multiple impacts, right? Noise, exhaust and air pollution, both in terms of health and sustainability, and also safety. So, all of those impacts deserve mention, and both in terms of the secondary or tertiary roads in your community that are affected, and the pile-on impact on roads like King Street, which are dangerous to begin with, and any incremental expansion of the airport is going to have further detrimental effects on King Street.
Okay. So why don't I move just along? Because if we can, this is good to identify some of these people who aren't here who could be useful, but in formulating views. But how about the passenger experience? Does anyone want to volunteer to take the lead on that? I could just put it out and we'll see what happens when we ask the other members of the group.
I feel like the convenience of the location of the airport outweighs the passenger experience given by how crowded it is.
Right. Yeah, this is the expansion question. Okay, and then the final one is the FBO issue. Anyone particularly want to work on that or give it some?
I'm happy to take the FBO.
Thank you, Greg.
And the issue with that is going to be to expand or not to expand? Is that the question? What's the specific issue involving the FBOs?
Well,
I mean, I think to the point here is like it's the pseudo airlines, right? That they're scheduled
Okay.
service without being part of the TUA.
yeah, and whether
If they're taking members of the public and not private owners, right?
Yeah, but let's be clear. This is not, it's really not an FBO issue. I mean, yes, the operators use the FBOs and want to use the FBOs, but the county's litigation is not with any FBOs. The
With the
county's
operators.
litigation is with the actual operators.
That's why I said we have to be, careful with our language, what we're talking about. So maybe if Greg's, taking it on, we can talk about the issues specific to the FBOs, and then there are issues specific to the operators. And it may be best to address, they're separate issues, but, look at them together.
Yeah, and the FBO's drive to expand is certainly related, at least to an extent, with
Yes.
the desire to court that additional business.
Right. And we've already identified, limiting the expansion of the FBOs is helping to improve noise. And it certainly would help improve stormwater runoff, right? So it has, effects on a number of different criteria that we're looking at here.
Do we know what the terms of the leases are between the county and the FBOs? I mean, is there any room here to manipulate, to change those terms so that there's some restrictions that people want to put in place?
I have
Good question.
copies. I have copies of most of the leases that I'd be happy to share to post. The unfortunate side is that the prior administration at the county renewed and or extended those leases long term with very little public input, and no notification to the airport advisory board. So it's a good number of years still till any of those leases come up. What's interesting, though, is that in some cases, the lessees who want to make changes, i.e. expansion of their facilities, that would require a renegotiation of the existing lease. So despite the fact, just to understand that it's not like any leases are about to expire, but these changes and expansions that a number of the operators, whether it be Millionaire, whether it be NetJets, whether it be several of the other FBOs, who want quote unquote equal treatment to Millionaire, in other words, permission to expand, all of that would require renegotiation of the existing leases.
Do the leases contain limitations on operating hours at all?
I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, that's the way I was
curious.
thinking, Martha, whether there were limitations that could be enforced through the lease.
Right.
I'll send the files I have to Greg to post.
Sounds
For our
good.
group.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that covers all the topics. Are there any other issues we should have in mind then about which we should be thinking about?
But you're not satisfied? That wasn't long enough list?
I'm just making sure everybody's satisfied.
There may be other issues that we think of when I think this is a good list to start with for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I
Maybe
hadn't
a
thought of
couple
the
others that
traffic
come up.
issue Rich raised, so that's an example.
Right.
Okay, so I will get out a, well, Greg, once you've got the recording ready to be distributed, let me know and I'll come on top of that email with kind of asking people to volunteer, right? To raise their hand for certain topics. We'll see how that goes. Shall we set a time for the next meeting, at least tentatively?
Yes.
But before we get to that, I guess now is as good of a time as any to dive into what I discussed a little bit earlier at this. So I'm going to share my screen because, as I said, we did the survey. I got a response from, I think, just about all of you, maybe except one. But the issue is that the results are all over the place, which I will show you guys. So that's what we have to try to figure out. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, this is how SurveyMonkey analyzes it for me. So let me just start at least with the good news first so there's consensus here that you guys only want to meet once a month. So one said twice a month, one said every other month. So I think once a month, I think is pretty much what the consensus is here. Now going back just to the top day of the week, as you can see, there's no really consistent 3 for Monday, 1 for Tuesday, 2 for Wednesday, 4 for Thursday. And then what days that you should avoid, we said this one you write in, once again, kind of a low pace, third Thursday, Tuesdays, Town of North Castle board meetings, whenever those are, first and third Monday, additionally Wednesday, second Wednesdays, fourth Mondays. So didn't really, unfortunately, give me too much to try to help you guys. So, yeah, look, again, it's whatever you guys want to do, but I know I did make this recommendation the first meeting, which again, it's an option for you guys to consider. So you guys been doing the fourth Thursday now for this is the third time in a row. You guys can stick with that, or you can use another day of the week, or just another option is that you can alternate. So just doing things not in any particular order, for example, you can keep the fourth Thursday, but next month you can do a Tuesday, and the following month you can go back to the fourth Thursday, or any iteration of any day of the week. So there's just some choices, but that's something you guys can need to figure out.
So the fourth Thursday next month would be the 27th of June.
No, it's the 20th.
No, that would be the 3rd.
I don't know how no,
Yeah, no,
because the first Thursday is the 6th, second is the 13th.
Second's the 13th. Yeah, the 3rd is the 20th, the 4th is the 27th. We've
Right,
been meeting.
but
on
we're
the
talking
4th.
the 3rd, no?
No.
This
So you
is
said the-
this is the fourth.
The
Fourth.
fourth? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Huh?
thought it was the third. Okay.
But we can do the third if that's what everyone wants, right? So,
Yeah, I can't do the fourth. I just happen to have association meeting here where I live, so. Just once a year, of course, that's on the 27th.
I'll be out of the country on the 20th, and I don't think I'll be able to join that day.
I can't do the 20th either.
So that's out.
see,
How about the 25th, Tuesday?
Yeah, or the 26th Wednesday.
That's a board meeting.
Ah, okay,
I can't do the 25th.
Okay. That's fine.
okay.
The 28th?
I can do Tuesday, the 18th.
I can't do the 18th.
No.
Okay,
Nobody wants to do the 25th, 28th, right? The Friday?
Friday? I don't think so.
That's what I'm saying. Nobody likes Fridays.
Or we do like a doodle and see which is the least bad day?
Right, that's fine.
I could put one
Um,
together, but my only concern is that it's just gonna end up right back where you
Be, right,
where
it's right back where we
Well,
started.
I'll tell you what, just focus on the week of June 24th to June 27th.
that's think
Those
about
4 days.
Right.
Majority wins.
Okay, that's fine.
yeah, it's too big a group to hope we get everybody.
Yeah, yeah, I said that's just 14 of you. Again, you said all of you are always volunteering for multiple commitments, so the likelihood of 14 of you not meeting is virtually zero.
It's okay. We can listen to the recordings and comment after
This is
needed.
exactly why I like to keep the recordings that way. Again, whoever's not there, I mean, you guys always have a reference for it later on.
Perfect.
All right, so
Okay,
then you won't then I guess you won't discuss that now. Then I'll create another Survey Monkey and I'll distribute that out, and whatever is the
majority wins.
majority wins.
Okay,
All right. Well,
democracy.
I thank you, everyone. I think we made some progress here. And let's see, we cast the net a little wider, see what other volunteers we get for each of the issues, and then we'll go forward. And I think
Excellent.
we agreed the TUA issue needs to be on the fast track. Might be desirable for the EMS issue to be on the fast track, but you know, the municipalities have gone so long without a budget contribution that might last another year. But we could put it on a fast track if it's possible. Okay?
Okay,
Okay,
All
Good
right.
night, everyone.
thank you.
Nope, just got one
Bye.
more thing. Nope,
Good night.
nope, you guys not going anywhere just yet. So one thing I just did want to ask everybody, is it, would anybody in this group be interested in potentially doing like an airport tour?
oh, I am.
Yeah,
Okay. No, because I've done it a couple times. Now, again, I can't promise it's gonna happen because it's exactly in my control, but I can ask April Gaspari, it goes to the manager of the airport, see if she can arrange that for us.
Okay.
okay, thanks, Greg.
Does it
Thank
include a
you.
flight?
Yeah.
No complimentary flight, no coupons for flight?
No, but also it's a really good thing.
I think I asked.
Task force, but it is really cool. So if
Only
you have
on a
these-
low flying helicopter.
All right.
By the take around buses, all you get to see all the different hangars. And just so everyone knows that that's actually how the airport gets the bulk of their money is from all those lease agreements. There is no tax dollars that goes into the airport. They do get some state and some federal funds, but they just say the bulk of their revenue does come from those lease agreements. But it is cool to see how all of them are situated.
Great.
And it's a
Count me
very
in.
educational process.
Count me in.
You
Alright.
better do a doodle for that then too.
Yeah, exactly.
That one, it's honestly partly going to be in whenever they can do it. So if they give me a date, we're just going to have to just stick with it.
Show up or not? That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really much show up if you can. If you can't, no big deal. But it's just an option I want to see if I can provide. But again, I can't make any promises because that's not obviously something within my jurisdiction. But at least what I can do is ask.
Good idea though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Greg. All right, we all okay now?
Yep.
All right,
Good night. Thank you.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Thanks, John.
okay.